SSL is a protocol that ensures that data exchange between a website and web server is encrypted. You've probably noticed the S after HTTP in a URL, or the lock symbol in your web browser. This indicates that the website is SSL encrypted. In this video, we'll talk about how to easily add SSL to your website or API for free using NGINX and LetsEncrypt. NGINX is an open source software for your web server used by lots of companies. We'll use NGINX as a reverse proxy, which is like a gateway to your web server that visitors pass through. NGINX can then route incoming requests to different APIs running on different ports or serve static files. We'll then use LetsEncrypt, a service that provides free SSL certificates to encrypt connections to NGINX. The first thing we'll need to do is buy a domain. You can use any domain registrar you want. I'll be using Google Domains. Next, you'll need a virtual machine to host your website or API. For that, I'll use DigitalOcean. There's a link in the description if you want $100 of free credits. Here I chose to go with the lowest end CPU and chose to log in with a password instead of SSH keys. Once your VM is set up, copy the IP address. We'll want to modify the DNS records for our domain, pointing it to the IP address of our server. Add two A records to your DNS configuration. First, use the @ symbol, which represents just your domain, and then type in www for the www subdomain. If you want to use a subdomain, go ahead and add two A records for your subdomain as well. An A record is what points a domain to an IP address. Whenever you modify DNS records for your domain, you need to wait for those changes to propagate, or update across the internet. DNS propagation generally takes a few hours. You can use a website like dnschecker.org to see if your DNS changes have propagated. Grab your IP address and SSH into the root user. Then use this command to install NGINX. Once NGINX is installed, visit your IP address in the web browser and you should see the default page. You can also directly visit your domain if the DNS changes have propagated. Now let's change the website with our own static content. cd into var/www. This is where folders for each of your domains will live. Create a folder for your domain, name it the same as your domain, and create an HTML folder inside that. I'm going to create an index.html file and paste in some sample code. Then cd to etc/nginx/sitesavailable. Copy the default configuration file and rename it as your domain. Let's edit the file. Remove default server after the part that says listening on port 80. We can only have one configuration as a default, and that's the file we copied from. Change the location of your files to the folder we created earlier. Then edit the server name with your domain. Make sure to add in the www subdomain as well. Save changes and then create a symlink between the sites available and sites enabled folders. Run sudo nginx-t to check your configuration file for any errors. Then run systemctl restart nginx to load in the changes. Refresh the page and you should see your new static files being served on port 80. You'll need to access your website with the domain because that's how we set up our nginx configuration files. If you want to host static content on a different subdomain, just follow the same process, but call your configuration file your subdomain.domain.com. Next, we'll set up SSL encryption on our domain, and you'll definitely need to make sure that your domain is accessible before doing that. Next, let's install Certbot, which is an application that will automatically manage getting SSL certificates from LetsEncrypt. Then run sudo ufw enable to set up a basic firewall. Allow NGINX in our firewall. Also enter sudo ufw allow ssh. Then check the firewall status to make sure the rules have been added. Now we can run Certbot to enable our SSL certificates. Pass in each domain with the -d flag. So we'll pass in our regular domain as well as the www subdomain. Enter your email address and agree to any prompts. Then select option 2 to automatically redirect all your traffic to HTTPS. Certbot will automatically renew your SSL certificates using LetsEncrypt every 90 days, but if you want to test the renewal process, you can run this dry run command. If you refresh your website, you'll see that now we have HTTPS. You can see the padlock symbol as well in your browser. So in addition to serving static content on your site, you might also want to host your API, maybe on a subdomain like api.yourdomain.com. To do that, we need to first head over to our domain registrar and change our DNS settings to add a subdomain. Now we need to run our API on some port of our server. I'm going to quickly install Docker and pull a hello world image from Docker in order to get an API going. Now I'm running my API on port 8000. If we visit port 8000 of our IP address, we'll see our API running, but we need to connect this port to our api.domain.com subdomain. cd into the sites available folder and create a new configuration file for the API subdomain. Create a new server block and set the appropriate server name. This time, instead of serving static files, we're going to proxy pass the request to another port on our server. Create a symlink to sites enabled just like we did with our previous subdomain. Now check your configuration file for any errors, and if there aren't any, restart NGINX. I forgot to add the www.api subdomain to our DNS record, so I'm going to go back to Google Domains and do that real quick. Now after waiting for those changes to propagate, I can use Certbot to add SSL certification to my subdomain and the www variant of my subdomain. Now I can use a tool like Postman to send GET requests to the API subdomain of my server, and as you can see, the requests are being forwarded to port 8000 and we're getting the proper response. If there's anything you want to see next, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.